needed a few bits, and then that's it. So yeah, put a few bits back, and then bang. And then the thing is,
we had a TL Audio VTC all tube console in here for 10, 15 years, which was a fantastic sounding board. It really tracked really well. But over the years, the owner's been collecting so many of the little bits and pieces and like oddities and different bits of outboard, and we just kind of wanted something that would pull it all together and make it really much more user-friendly. We had so many mic pre's that weren't really getting used because just kind of the setup or the integration with workflow wasn't quite working. So then one morning I saw this thing get announced pretty early, and it piqued our interest, and we went to have a look at one, demoed it, and we're like, okay, this seems really good. We can set it up and kind of shoot out different preamps quite easily. We have an XLR patch for kind of like testing out different things, seeing with the snare. We need more of a kind of rocky, distorted snare. We might use the Helios, or, you know, pretty much quite consistently we end up leaning on either the new or the old Neves. For the most things, because they just work very quickly. If you get a vocalist through the door, and there isn't time to kind of test different things out, we generally lean on the new 1073s, honestly, just because they seem like modern and punchy and kind of get the job done. I mean, an example of a particularly elaborate tracking session is like every Friday, Nick and Jack come in here and make quite large, loud analog techno. And there's a ton of synths and outboard that gets used across the board on this thing. And it might be a situation where they have like all 24 channels and all the groups running. They might be in a good place with it, but might want to kind of like leave it and either like until you can save how the whole thing was routed, make a few little notes based on what you have going on in there, and then it saves all the kind of aux routing and all the kind of different presets with that. So for a recording session, that's quite useful. I guess the big thing really is mixes though. So like when we're doing mixes, like it varies for me. Obviously bigger projects, when we get to work on bigger projects that have got like better budgets, we can work in this room a lot more. But like a lot of the people that I work with now are kind of, you know, it might be a case where they can rent our Studio B for like the majority of the project, but maybe they can only afford like 2 or 3 days in this room. For ideally, I like it maybe one at the beginning and one at the end. So like I'll have like a day where I come in here and in the first instance I'll go straight in on the vocal on a mix. Once I have all that set up, I print back into Logic. And then usually, I mean, I'll make notes about how I had things in case I really do need to go back, but I usually like to commit quite quickly. And then I'm basically starting the mix again with absolutely, you know, the stems how I want them. This just feels like a really brilliant modern equivalent. It feels like the kind of the more modern, punchy kind of Neve thing. It doesn't feel like, I remember using the VR Legend in a studio in Liverpool initially, which like when you're mixing like a rock record or something like that is absolutely amazing. But this thing just kind of like, I don't know, it's like a lot. There's a big emphasis on kind of space and stereo image. I feel the width dial to be approached with caution for the most part is like just a very subtle, brilliant kind of mid-sides processor. Usually what I'll do is I'll turn it on and kind of just leave it at like 0 to 10%, like almost. Even when you have it set to 0, it just seems to go like that with the mix and what you're working on. Today I've got a tube limiter that we use quite a lot to kind of like pull up, you know, bang up the bass and maybe the vocals a bit in the chorus, so that I'll kind of ride that into the mix. And then once you have a really good desk mix, then I'll print the whole thing back in again. So, and then it kind of varies really. Like the summing on the desk is a decision, and so like what I will do is I'll print the whole master, but then I'll also print all the group stems as well. And then it's generally a question of like shooting out really. Like I'll have a desk summed version, and then I'll have a version which is just all my new stems. The desk sum is always really nice, but like, you know, even still then, sometimes just my printed stems sound really brilliant. We've just installed we had an Apogee Symphony system for like a really, really long time, and it was just about getting a little bit out of date. Still like really, really good converters, but we've just upgraded to like an Antelope Orion HD, which is just a dream. I kind of can't believe they've packed so much I/O into such a small box. But that just means that because we have 32 ins now, you can print all the channels, all the groups, all of the master fader, everything like that, straight back into the box. In recording, like, you're less about kind of summing things together with the groups. It's more just about like more channels that are just convenient enough to have the effect set up with them. We have the Lex that's automatically normal to group 3 and 4. This can be printed straight to the Orion really, really quickly. And then for later on, when you get to the mix, then normally the rev returns, we're using the tube limiter, which can add like parallel compression over the whole mix for different things. This is a session made by a producer called Skits Beats, a track that he produced which features Mist, Unknown T and Burna Boy.
This artillery's military. Gun smoke, gunpowder in my new Mary. I just wanna live it and bill it. Money is minutes. Now I ain't really into gimmicks. Cause I was tagged at my aunties. I just threw it all one up in my banshee. Remember when I never had no plan B? Remember when I never had no canteen?
Bassa, bassa, lubidu. Come to your block if I'm searching for you. I don't know what they've been telling you, but my heart black like parsley you. Unknown steppers outside of the booth. Quickly slide under you. Cause I'm untouchable. Broke with a big stick and belly too.
216 tracks on it, and there was a lot of like overdubs and a lot of live instrumentation that went into it as well. A large amount of the work that's done in the box on my NS10s in the next room, and then when we kind of want to get to a finishing stage, we'll group the tracks and then send it to all the different places here. So like I have this like, you know, I have got my drums, I've got bass, got guitars, synths, sax and strings, vocals, BVs, incidentals and effects. With the drums, I'm sending out to the main mix, but then I'm also sending them to groups 1 and 2 and making a copy of that. That's then going into over here, which is going into our tube limiter, and then you can set the you can set inserts on this to kind of add certain effects on it. So like I've got that's going into our tube limiter here, which is hitting here, and then what I'll do is I'll print that effect back into Logic, and then usually like automate the certain amount that I'm adding to it, or we'll just ride it on the print, basically decide how much you want to go in. We are very much hoping to get the flying faders that's available for this, so that we can start to kind of automate this and get really, really into vocal rides and all that kind of stuff on the desk. We have the patch bay normal to like our most used effect, and so like aux 1 is set to the space echo by default, so we've got a kind of slap effect on that. So this is the dry. We've got that coming in. Then we're sending out on the stereo cue, which sends out to the Lexicon 224, which comes out through there. This is like probably my favourite reverb. It just sounds really, really, really good.
Remember when I never had no plan B? Remember when I never had no canteen?
Bassa, bassa, lubidu. Come to your block if I'm searching for you. I don't.
This is an absolutely banging vocal booth that we like most of the time, because vocals is the main thing that we do in this room. But we're going to be building a similar hut, Oralex hut for around the kit, and we want to kind of have a permanent setup that's kind of just here for people who just, for, you know, exactly, you want to be in a situation where a moment's notice you can be like, oh yeah, this thing could do with drums, and then have like a kind of preset how that's all set up. The first pre is going to the 1066. The second pre is going to the 1084, 3 and 4 are the 2 Helios match pair, then you've got 5 on the Avalon, 6 on the Chandler, and then there's a few more 500 series API and Shadow Hills. The green, which is the DAW returns, on the orange, the Mix B, and you have all of the preamps, so you can access them quite quickly.
Come baby, come scale you. Her body blessed, pop professional. Shawty wanna nigga with a gun revenue. Baby, you.
Dub makes, yeah.
And then bang. And then the thing is, right, do it, Jack. I say Jack's the Zen man, the everything.
Well, he knows his way around this thing. Trying to keep up with you, mate.
As we move through the track, you'll see more things coming through on mix A that we've already decided are going to be good. Yeah, and then end up, hopefully at the end of the day, with everything on mix A that's either already been printed back through the Orion, but the effects will have gone back through the Orion and we'll be committed to them. And then often we'll automate the effects that have been printed. We're often hitting red for quite a lot of the time. So it's sympathetic to this kind of music, as you can hear by the drive and everything. Yeah, it's just choosing the right hardware for everything, and obviously having the beefy analog synths straight in. It just makes it easy to get that kind of heavy sound. Yeah, like Hitesh just complements it really well. It keeps everything, anything you want clean is always going to be super clean. Anything that you want dirty it's easy just to drive it a bit harder and get that out of it. It definitely doesn't lack any of the kind of saturation that you might want. It's good to just concentrate more on how the recording sounds, like mic placement or the sound of the synthesizer for a start. It's good that you're not distracted by feeling that you need to EQ stuff straight away. I really like the high shelf on the master. I use that quite a lot on these sessions. It just helps give it like a bit of excitement right from the start of the track. I tend to lean more on the high shelf than the low shelf. Yeah, so I definitely use the EQ that the desk offers, but I'm not craving a channel EQ every time. If you get the sweet spot on the line amp right for whatever you're recording, and then you ride the faders. Recently I've started riding the faders into the prints a lot more. So I had a thing with some strings on recently, and it's just so much better than overly compressing them or EQing them too much. It was just to get the level balance right on your print on the way in, and then obviously there might be some fine-tune automation to do afterwards, but it's like giving life to the mix without having to crush anything or overly EQ anything. So yeah, the system of doing it like that, removing the temptation to EQ too early is really good, I think.